In this section of the HTML5 standard, we're going to be talking about CSS3 and styling, which is once again categorized in the HTML5 umbrella of technologies. We're going to talk about the entire lesson talks about 5 different things. This example combines all 5 into one website. Talk about opacity, how we can do opacity with CSS, rounded corners with CSS, gradients, animations, and web fonts. Web fonts aren't technically the CSS, but it works well to go with the styling aspects of the CSS3. The code in front of us, we can see at the top of the page, we'll actually work backwards here, is that you can see that web fonts has to do with importing fonts into a page. Previously, if you had a font and you try to use it in your design that wasn't on the operating system that had the browser, your design might be broken and have a strange appearance. But now with web fonts, you can link fonts via HTTP in a web page. As you see at the top there, I use the link in the head here at the top to link in different fonts, typefaces. Opacity and rounding corners, as because we're in the HTML section here of the code, all I have really here to see is the standard structure that I showed in previous lessons about the body with a header and a nav. Here's the header, here's a nav. This div here is going to contain an animation. You're going to see it shortly. It's very annoying, I promise. Then we have sections for ID news and sports, and just I just made something up here. And a heading tag, and then the footer, and then they close out the HTML document. So here we don't have much new. It's just the basics there. And then we're going to go into the CSS3 and look into the actual CSS file that's located there. And we can go and first see the page here. We can do and see all the different, wait, I'm going to reload this page for you. When you reload it, here we see our animation. As promised, very annoying. Yes. I'm going to quickly walk you through here. We can see a box with rounded corners, something that was very difficult to do previously before CSS3. We can see shadowing we can also do in the background there. We see the gradients in the color. I'm going from green to blue here. Let me see as we move down, it goes to blue. And I've done that in the entire page. Once again, rounded corners down here at the bottom. And then we've covered all the different aspects. The opacity can be seen in this image. The opacity, the images, I think the opacity is set at 50%. So you can see through the image, if you want to call it that. So I'm combining all these aspects into one example here. And then we're going to look at the CSS file. We'll show how we've done that. Here in the header, I say I'm using the font family dancing script. And here in the body, I'm using the font family Alerta stencil. If I jump back to this one, we'll see there they are, Alerta stencil, dancing script. So I've used a bunch of different fonts. And if we go back to the actual page, you can see there's a bunch of little crazy fonts all over the place. Here in the header, here in the nav, and here in the body. Just so you can see how these things work. And if we go back to the CSS, I'm going to say, okay, opacity. Now it's very simple. You just set the value of the opacity to a decimal between 0 and 100%, or between 0 and 100, or 1 in this case. And then that sets the opacity. The closer you get to 1, then it's the full image. The closer you get to 0, then it's invisible if you set it to 0. If we talk about the gradient portion, we look at the body. You see I used the command linear gradient, and you go from what color to what color. And so I just did green to blue, and then that's what we get. And that was for the body. I set that CSS, so the entire page wanders from green at the very top, blue at the very bottom, and it degrades between the two there in the middle. Border radius here in the footer. And where do we have it in the... I thought I had it somewhere else. Here's border radius. The Moz and WebKit commands. These are deprecated, so you can just write border radius now, but they'll work. As this is for the navigation, and this one is for the footer down here. And you're setting the border radius, the amount of curve on the corners, and you can just set them to it. They're almost a circle, or they're just slightly rounded. So border radius, or doing the rounded corners previously, you would do boxes and have small images that you placed in each of the 4 corners to make things rounded. So now it's much easier to do with CSS3. And then the big one we saw there as we were looking at this was the animations. The rounded corners, opacity, and gradients are rather straightforward. They're just commands, border radius, linear gradients, and so forth. No problem. And same with the shadows, though not presented specifically in the lesson. It's always nice to be able to do the shadows that we saw. And these pop up. I think I only used it here. In the nav, you see the shadow behind it. And you can set the offset for how far the shadow sticks out and the color and so forth, obviously. But the big one was, when I refresh this, I think I only do it for a few seconds, are animations. And these are, there we go, that I have an image here that I'm animating and becoming larger and smaller. I think 3 times. And then we have the animation container. It does in and out. You have a variety of different animations you can use. 3 seconds we see there. Iteration count infinite. And then we have the keyframes. You can set frames, and you can do, of course, much more advanced animations than what I've shown. And then it transform and scales to twice the size and so forth, up and down. And a WebKit. And there's the actual image that I'm using with the hello. Set the height and pix and margin. So here we have a large example using a variety of the CSS3 stylings with a focus on showing simply the commands you use for opacity, rounded corners, gradients, animations, and web fonts. So download the code, test these, and see how they work, and see how you can change them and learn a little bit more about CSS3 and styling.